I've been looking at my memories on Facebook, and it blows my mind that it's been 3 years today since I turned in the keys to my last studio apartment in Miami, Florida. The last apartment I ever had to myself, my last place of financial independence, my last place of basically living the American dream. And it's just mind-blowing how it's been 3 years now. Let's go over a short story of those memories. So here's the pictures of the day I turned in my keys 3 years ago, and it's just crazy of how I still remember it like it was yesterday, especially this one. It was a wild time. Like, I was really wanting to get out of there because of the demonic entity in the apartment. And to make the long story short, I was trying to escape from the lockdowns of the pandemic because I wanted to move on from grocery deliveries and move on to bartending. I worked my way towards starting a business, and Florida was the only state open at the time, so I was rejected 30 times statewide. Then got approved for this apartment because the previous tenant was a nut job doing drugs and screaming like a demon outside of the building, and the cops had to escort him, and the landlord had to eventually evict him, and that's when I came in. And after that, I was not having the best of luck and got fired 3 weeks later, and then got fired from bartending. Then overall, the apartment just felt like it was getting more and more sick and demented. Like, literally, it felt like it was on fire late at night with horns all around me, staring at me, kind of entity. Even though the air conditioner's on, it's still hot in there, and you still smell piss and rotten carcasses at 3 a.m. It was really scary at that time. I was really wanting to get the hell out of there. And with all the luck I was not having, so I was like, get me out of here. And I remember I was just so scared of being in that apartment. I used to literally hide in that closet right behind the picture where it's taken. Man, it was a bizarre time. I remember just getting in the apartment, laying the keys in the counter, and just driving the fuck out of there. I remember I had a neighbor who came in next to me who was a chick that was single. She'd always wear like a short little dress and I'd walk up the stairs ahead of me so she could get a view of her panties. Like, she was a horn dog for sure. I remember she would come home from work, she'd be like, hey, hey, and I'd be right into my car and be like, nope, gotta go, because I was just focused on getting the hell out of there. I actually talked to her for a few minutes before turning the keys. She said she was super liberal, and I was like, yeah, no. Um, so I remember after that, I turned in the keys, and then I drove out of there with the gate, and it was getting dark, and as I'm getting gas right next door, I can just see like black clouds above where my apartment was, and the distance of the road getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer until I snapped out of it. And once I drove out of there, all that energy that was draining me was finally gone. That was also the same time everything in America was starting to fall apart and inflation was skyrocketing the moment I left. Like, I just lost my apartment in Miami, lost my job, unable to find another job. And this was when the trend of nobody wants to work was getting more and more real. I remember all the fast food places around me had like one or two people with now hiring signs, dining room closed because they don't have enough people. And when I tried finding a bartending job, it would be like the same thing. They would give me a couple days of serving, then they took me to hosting with no training or explanation. And then they gave me from 30 hours a week to 12 to like 1 day a week for 6 hours. And that's when I left and never came back. Then I did DoorDash. And back then on DoorDash, I could make like $88 a day from working 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. minimum. And rent was $1,200 downtown at the time. Like, it was somewhat of a livable wage at the time. But this is when like everything was just going downhill like really, really fast. Nobody wants to work, nothing being open past 10. The city was starting to become alive again, but then inflation started to be on the rise. And back then, nobody could afford to live on 840, let alone 14 at the time. It wasn't a livable wage. And what's crazy is now today, inflation's so high on the rise, no one can afford to live on $12 an hour, let alone $25 in some areas. It's not a livable wage, and it's just mind-blowing how I look back at the time I had my own place to live back in Miami, and it's been 3 years now. Like, it's just crazy of how everything is just changing so fast.